Welcome everybody to the Story Cafe. I'm Adrianna, your host, and the Story Cafe is a podcast where I talk about the messiness of life and I infuse it with stories of my own experiences getting through that messiness. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I have been plotting and planning for a while to do a Mother's Day episode, and it is proving a little more difficult than I thought it would be. Partly because life is busy, but probably more so because I've been avoiding it. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about my process and how these podcasts come to be. And then I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than I have all the other ones as a way of maybe getting over my writer's block. So normally when I do a podcast, I sit down and I start writing based on a theme. So, for example, when I wrote Taking Risks, I wrote that out as if I were going to read a script. And then I trim it down a little bit. And I don't read it, but it helps gives my thoughts some order. Because I know sometimes when I ramble, I can go all over the place. And I really want the podcast to feel somewhat organized. So I write things out. And then when I record, I have the sheet with me. And sometimes I trim that down to notes, just bullet point notes. And sometimes I actually have it kind of beside me and I'll refer to it as I go along. So that's normally what I do. And so far it's worked for me, although it does take what I've discovered. It takes a lot of time. So I spend a lot of time on the writing and then I have to produce the podcast. And that takes some time too. And these last couple months of school as a teacher, if you're a teacher out there, you know, are really hectic and really busy. I also am a student, so I'm going to school and that's really busy right now. And I'm a parent and I'm a human that tries to exercise. So there's a lot going on and I do find sometimes the writing to be a bit daunting. So what I have noticed the last couple weeks is partly because I'm busy, but I also think I have been avoiding writing this because it's a really hard podcast to write. And so this episode I'm going to do different. I have a few little notes here, but mostly I'm just going to share with you the things that have been on my mind about this episode, the things I wanted to try to infuse into the episode, and hopefully it turns into something that works and resonates with people. So this is the Mother's Day podcast. I wanted to start this episode dedicating it to the moms we have, the moms we've lost. I know a lot of folks who listen. I know a number of folks who listen like me have lost their moms. But I also want to dedicate it to the moms we missed, the moms who stepped in when they didn't have to, the moms we wish we had but didn't get for lots of different reasons. And I wanted to start with that dedication because I think I should say this is not going to be your Hallmark card podcast. I think our relationships with our moms can be really complicated, and I want to honor that. I don't think it's always helpful to just paint motherhood and parenthood as this shiny, lovely, wonderful thing and forget all the other stuff. So, I think our relationships with our moms can be really complicated. And mine was very complicated. And so I want this episode to be about that. And it's probably, if I know myself well enough, I'm probably gonna get a little emotional at some point. So if you're not in a feeling sort of place right now, you might want to pause this one and wait till later. Because I want to be honest and I want to be realistic about our moms and those relationships. And hopefully, we get to the end of this podcast and we can hold both of those truths at the same time. That our relationship with our moms can be really messy, can be really complicated, and we can have wonderful, beautiful relationship with our moms or with other people who mother us. And we can hold those two truths. And I was lucky enough in my life to have my mom who, like I said, I have a very complicated relationship with. Uh, and that relationship got a lot better as I got older and when she was able to get the help she needed for her mental health. But it stayed complicated till the end because of her own kind of life history. But I also was lucky enough to have other women who stepped in as mentors or who mothered me. And those, women didn't have to do that, but they did. And that's made a big difference in my life. And I know so many people who that's true for, right? They have that auntie who, stepped up and really mentored them, or maybe they lived with a grandparent. There's just so many examples of how our families look, and those things can all be true at the same time. I've been thinking a lot about why our relationships with our moms are so complicated. And it's funny because everything's a spectrum, right? And so our level of relationship with our mom is different for all of us. But as a mom, I think the thing that I realize is that when we parent, whether we are parenting by choice or we are parenting a human that we helped create, when we parent, those little humans look up to us and expect the world from us, right? As a mom, my kids need me to hold them when they cry, but not hold them sometimes and know the difference. And my kids need me to fix all the things that are broken. And I need to keep them safe. And they want me to keep them happy. I mean, the list is endless of the things our kids expect from us. And underneath it all is a lot of times our kids look at us like superheroes, right? And they see and they think that we can do it all. Because to them, we do. And it's really complicated when, as an adult, you realize that, wow, that human that raised me is a human being too. And so they're complicated and they have scars and they have trauma. They have all sorts of things going on in their own lives. And their lives are messy. And so we have this kind of collision of a human who wants and needs us to be their superhero, and the reality that as a mom, we're all just trying to get through life in one piece and have some joy and have some love, all the things. And I think that's part of why our relationships become really complicated, because we're human and superhuman all at the same time. And that can be really messy. Now, my relationship with my mom was on that spectrum of complicated, quite complicated because of her mental health issues. So if you've listened before, you know that my mom had mental health issues and those turned into addictions. And I'm generally really fine talking about those things. I think that that's just part of my reality and it was part of her reality. And so in my childhood, I wasn't able to live with her because she wasn't able to take care of me. But when I feel like around 18, my mom was able to get the help that she needed. She sobered up. And from there on, we rebuilt our relationship until she passed away. And that relationship was really special because we had gotten through this hurdle that many people never get through. And I've had conversations with people about, complicated mom relationships. And something that was different about my mom than some other moms, I think, who have challenges is that my mom always made sure that I knew that she loved me. And I've worked with lots of kids who they don't know that and their mom hasn't been able to communicate that to them. And there are lots of moms who, aren't able to even a little bit parent their kids. And so I would say those are really far spectrum relationships, and I'm not going to touch on those today because I want to touch on those relationships that have both that kind of messiness, but also that love and that caring that is there. Mother's Day is always a really kind of messy holiday for me because I have children, and so on Mother's Day, my kids always give me cards they made at school, which have progressed quite nicely. We've moved away from, macaroni cards, I guess, to things that are a bit more they're more real and true for them. So like really lovely poems and coupon books and things like that. And so my kids really want to celebrate me on Mother's Day. But I always struggle because my mom passed away a week after Mother's Day. So I'm always kind of have those two things in mind, which is that I'm a mom and I love being a mom, and my kids teach me so much. And they give me, so much energy and motivation to push through hard things. But I also really miss my mom. And one of the hardest things when I lost my mom was I used to call my mom pretty much every day in the last couple years of her life, because she was sick for maybe a year or two kind of leading up to her death. And so I would call, and it wouldn't always be a long conversation, but hey mom, and I would always, it was always hilarious because I would always call and I would always say, hey mom, it's Adrianna. And she would say every time, I know who it is. I know your voice. And yet I could not help myself. I could not stop telling her who I was. And then it kind of became a joke, which was fun. But I would call her every day. And after she passed away, I would still go to the phone and like look at my husband and say, okay, nope, not going to do that. And those things that you lose when you lose a parent, and I think it's probably true if you lose, a sibling or whoever it is that you're really, really close with. But for me, like just having to let go of those things that I always did was so hard. And so Mother's Day is always, I have a lot of feelings about it. I try on Mother's Day to always go out and do something really physical by myself because it gives me that like solo time to process those feelings. And then I try to do the whole breakfast in bed situation where I let my kids take a million years to bring me cold food and orange juice and coffee. And we have a good chuckle over that. So that's kind of what Mother's Day looks like for me. And I think it's probably complicated for a lot of people. And so I know this episode's going to come out on Mother's Day. And I do hope that folks out there are able to find time on that day for yourself to either kind of be introspective and do some reflection on those things, or surround yourself with people if that works for you. Because these holidays, and I think Father's Day is the same, these holidays can be tough. They can dredge up a lot of stuff for us. But my relationship with my mom, although it was complicated, I have some pretty stellar, awesome memories with my mom. And sometimes when I think about them, I realize that they're not always like picket fence memories, right? They're not what we might. Sometimes I'll tell a story sometimes about my childhood and I just think it's like normal. And I'll look at someone's face and I'll realize, oh, this is not what other people experience. And then I have to like dial it back a little bit and like pause and go like, okay, well, I know maybe this isn't what lots of people experience, but it was my experience. So my relationship with my mom is a bit like that. I have lots of kind of stories about my time that I spent with her. I lived with her till I was about 6.5, I think. And those memories really stick with me. And they're the memories where I got to see the moments that she was doing, all the things she could possibly do within her capacity to parent me, to love me, and to mother me. And so I hold on to those, and they're always going to be really special. And there's stories that I tell my kids, when they ask about my mom's nickname was Chipper, and I don't fully understand the story behind it. My aunts and uncles might have a better sense of this. I feel like it had something to do with they had a dog named Chipper. Maybe there was a leaf pile. Somehow my mother's nickname became Chipper. And so my kids called her Grandma Chip Chip. And it was always this kind of fun way to, like, when she lived in the community she lived in, like, nobody knew her by her first name. Like, it just, whenever I run into someone, they'll be like, oh, like, where are you from and who's your parents kind of thing. And I'll often say, like, my mom's name. And then I'm like, oh, well, Chipper. And they're like, oh, my goodness, Chipper. I was friends with her brother so-and-so, or I know her sister so-and-so. And so my kids called her Grandma Chip Chip. And so I tell them these stories about, for example, when I was a kid, I loved the movie Annie. And at the time, there were video stores. Now, I realized this was a hot minute ago, and video stores don't exist. This was pre-Blockbuster even. But communities would all have these video stores. And we would go into the video store on days that my mom got paid. And I remember my mom used to get her pay in a little brown envelope. And I'm not sure why I remember the little brown envelope, but this was before like automatic deposit. And she would have to go to a building and pick up this envelope that would have cash in it. And if she was working a different job that gave checks, she would have to take the check, would go to the bank. And I would always have a lot of fun. The bank used to have deposit slips and they were different colors and pens attached to the desk. And I would go in while we waited in line and grab these deposit slips and like draw and write on them and stuff. But my mom often would get paid in this envelope. And we would go to the video store. And every time we went to the video store, I would look for Annie. And every time we went, my mother would say, "Can you please pick a different movie?" And I would just go find Annie. And if Annie was not in the video store, and I don't remember the details of this, but I do know if Annie was not there, I did not know what to do with myself. And I watched this movie over and over and over. And despite the fact that it probably drove my mother batty, even though she didn't want me to get it, she would rent that movie for me every single time we had the chance. And I tell my kids that story and they think it's hilarious. But it becomes a joke because now, like, you can watch Annie on Netflix, for example. And when I see it, I'll be like, "Oh, let's watch Annie." And the kids are like, "Hard pass. We're not watching Annie." And it becomes this thing we laugh about because we know the story behind me in this movie. I also remember my mom would take me to this restaurant. I think it was called Combs. And it was in Halifax. And they were lovely. They used to have pickled eggs on the counter and you could buy like a pickled egg. And it was a diner and they had fries and my mom taught me how to tip. And she always used to say, if it's not good service, you just leave a penny. And that's how they know you were not happy with the service. But if you leave something more than a penny, then they know. Now, I don't actually know. Sometimes my mother would say things that were kind of off the wall. I don't actually know if that whole penny thing was the standard. But it's what I grew up understanding. It certainly wasn't in a time when I think everyone automatically tipped. I think tipping was becoming a thing and tipping was connected to like how you felt about the service. So I have so many memories with my mom that are really lovely. And those help balance out the memories with my mom that are really challenging. And for me, Mother's Day this year, one of the things I started thinking about is what would I say to my mom if I could see her again? And it's a really, like, if I could have 10 minutes with my mom and she would be perfectly functional, perfectly aware, and we could just have a conversation for 10 minutes, what would I say to her in that context? I think the first thing I would do if I had like 10, 15 minutes is I would try to give her all the updates on how my kids were doing. Because my mom loved being a grandma. And I think she loved it because she didn't have the baggage with my kids that she had with me. Like she didn't have, like with me, my mom was always trying to make up for things. And she did it in the weirdest ways. But my mom, she felt a lot of guilt for the choices she made in her life and how they impacted me. And even though I had forgiven her because I could see that so much of her choices were connected to her mental health, which were connected to her own childhood and her own life. And so I was able to get to a place of forgiveness with her. But she didn't, I don't think she ever forgave herself. And she spent so much time. I told you I was going to get choked up. She spent so much time trying to make up for that with me. And some of the ways that she did that were, my mom loves Sobeys. And being from the town of Sobeys. She was always hunting for a deal. So she loved the clearance section, the clearance basket, any kind of deal she could get. And if meat went on sale, she had money that she would buy all kinds of it. And so one of the ways that she tried to, make up to me for this childhood I had was by giving me stuff, but it was often in the form of like meat. So I would come over and she'd be like, oh, I got some stuff for you. And we would go to the freezer and it would be like burger was on sale. So I got you some of that. And pork was on sale. So I got you a bunch of packages of that. And oh, they had this really good deal. I mean, it's kind of endless. She would go in Sobeys. I think a lot of grocery stores, they have the carts that have clearance stickers on them. And she knew where they were. They were the first kind of stop she made at Sobeys. And so she would just find weird things and give them to me. And it was her way of trying to make up for the years that we didn't have together. And I just had to, embrace it and accept it. And at first I kind of resisted it because my mother was really poor. And so it seemed to me ridiculous that she would spend her money buying piles. She had a deep freeze just to have the stuff in it that she would buy on sale. And so it seemed silly to me that she would spend her money on that, but it was important to her. And so I had to just let her do that. She once gave me a grandfather clock she'd got at a yard sale, but it wasn't like old, like it wasn't an antique or anything. And she was so excited. And my husband and I were like, what are we going to do with this? So we took it home and then eventually it got broken. But she was always doing that. She was always trying to find ways to kind of make up for things. But she loved being a grandma. She collected dimes for the kids. She would always have little things for the kids whenever we went there. And the kids in her neighborhood, I think, really loved her because she was that weird kind of kooky cat lady in the neighborhood, but she was super friendly to kids. So I would give her all the updates on her grandkids and how well they're doing because I think that would bring her joy. I would ask her for her spaghetti sauce recipe because my mother made the most unique spaghetti sauce and it was delicious. It was spicy. Like I can't even describe it. I honestly can't. And she would make pots of it, freeze it and give it to me. But she was known for her spaghetti sauce. Like I think a lot of my cousins, she would give them spaghetti sauce too. And she was I've never been able to recreate it. It was something where she would gather she didn't even have the recipe. So if I could sit her down and have a conversation, I would tell her about her grandchildren. And then I would ask her for her spaghetti sauce recipe because I miss it so much. And I did come close once to making it, but it still wasn't the same. And then I think the third thing I would say to her is just thank you for loving me because I think that gave me what I needed to push through the really trying times that were my childhood. And so many kids that I've worked with in the past didn't have that. And that's everything. I could forgive her because I knew she loved me. And I knew that she would make the best possible decision she could. And then if I had enough time after saying thank you for loving me, I would try to convince her to forgive herself. Because I think she deserved that. To come through the things she went through, have a child, mess up in lots of ways. To the outside viewer, my mother messed up a lot. But I came out the other side and I survived all that. And part of it was that piece about the fact that she did love me, but she also rallied people to support me. I talked about this in my last episode, how these good friends of mine, she talked to them about taking care of me. She rallied people to mother me and take care of me when she knew she couldn't. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing for someone to have enough awareness to do. So that's what I would say to my mom. I would say those three things. I'm not 100% sure what she would say to me if she could. She'd probably want to know about the grandkids. And hopefully she'd probably say to me about the spaghetti sauce, to be honest. She's like, I don't know. I just go to the grocery store and I buy these things. And then I put them together. I don't think she ever actually wrote the recipe down. So this episode, I wanted to dig in. I first named this episode Dear Mom because it is a bit of an ode to my mom. But I want to shift a little bit away from that because I want to also say to all the folks out there who are moms, have women in their life that love them, even if they aren't their moms, all the different ways that we relate to moms. And sometimes we don't. I know people who don't have great relationships at all with their moms. But we all kind of exist in this world where, it's messy and we're trying to muddle through it. And I don't think we stop and take enough time to honor the real hard bits of being mothered, the hard bits of mothering, the hard parts of taking on mothering of other people, and it's hard, raising humans is really fucking hard. And you are plagued with, what if I do it wrong? What if I mess up? What if I don't show them I love them enough? What if they get hurt? What if I don't protect them? All the while we're navigating our own stuff. And it's not easy and it's not perfect. In fact, it's a really difficult road. But I think a debt of gratitude, one day a year is never enough because the things that women do around us to propel us forward, to take care of, children, to take care of families, and then eventually they take care of their own parents again, right? You think about mothering of children, but then we also mother our parents when they get to a certain age. And it's such important work. And we almost never take time to honestly recognize how hard that is. And so this episode is really about gratitude, thankfulness. For me, I want to thank all the women who stepped up in my life, who are still in my life, who mother me in lots of different ways. And you know who you are, I think. I hope you do. The people I call when I don't know what to do with my finances, the people I call when I'm just struggling emotionally. There's all kinds of, women in my life who I've been really lucky. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And that's the whole it takes a village model. And we need more villages to raise, I think, our children. We need more of that system of coming together, working together so that we can support kids to grow up and be strong and be resilient, because that's the hard part. And if we support each other, then we can better support our kids. I hope that in my lifetime, before my children have children, that our world changes enough to acknowledge just how valuable and thankless the job of parenting is, and that changes and we can find better ways to support raising of children. And I hope that, as you walk away from this episode, if you take a role in mothering someone, give yourself a pat on the back. If you have a complicated relationship with your mother, I hope that you find some peace in that in any way that makes sense for you. And that doesn't always mean forgiveness. I have worked with young people who have had parents who have done unforgivable things. And I would never ask those young people to forgive them other than to give themselves forgiveness. And we should do an episode on forgiveness because I think that's a big thing. Sometimes we think forgiveness is about other people. And for me, forgiving my mom was about me. And it was about my mom to a certain extent, but she never forgave herself. So me forgiving her didn't change that. But forgiving her was for me. Because life is messy and we have to muddle through it together. And on this Mother's Day, or if you're listening to it after Mother's Day, I hope that you find time to reflect, pat yourself on the back, whatever that looks like for you, to find some joy and happiness. Because it is hard to muddle through this life. And parenting is hard, and mothering is hard. So if it's a tea, a bike ride, calling a friend, laying in your bed and staring at the ceiling, having a hot bath, gardening, whatever that looks like for you. I hope that you do something enjoyable, find some peace in your day, and we will be back here again. I think upcoming episodes that you can expect include being enough. That is what I'm working on right now, which I guess is kind of connected to this, but it's all about just taking the moments when we just need to accept that as we are right now is enough, and that's okay. And then, forgiveness. I think that's a great one to dig into because I think that's real complicated. And I think we don't have good tools to deal with guilt and shame. And therefore, we end up in weird spirals where we can't forgive ourselves. So those are some upcoming episodes. If you have ideas for upcoming episodes, let me know. I will do my best. I rarely have answers, but I do have lots of thoughts. And I do love sharing them with all of you. And I thank you again over and over and over for your listening, showing up, even as I muddle through. You are the best. I love all your comments. I love your messages. Have a great day, everyone. Bye for now.